The new Haute42 X series comes with a lot of modular pieces to customize your controller. Here we have the joystick extension, so you can use it for games outside of just fighting games. And you can even opt for a full WASD layout. And you can either have MX switches or these low profile switches to customize the feel. Now for the actual unit, the unboxing experience is fairly premium with it coming in this travel case. And with all the plastic taken off, here it is. And on the bottom you can see that they have a custom design with their logo. And beyond the controller, the case has cutouts for the rest of our control modules, a braided USB-C cable, which is a really nice touch considering the original models would only have rubber cables, so this adds some great flexibility to your cable so it doesn't wear out as easily. You get your usual spare parts with the key switches and key switch puller, stick caps to put on the joysticks for a better grip, and then a screwdriver to unscrew and place in your different modules. Now with the controller plugged in, you can see the button legends light up with the RGB, and at the top we have the input display. Because of the metal design, you're gonna get quite a bit of fingerprints, and with the glossy buttons and the glossy control panel, you're gonna see quite a bit of oil buildup as well. At the top we have a really sleek control panel with the buttons all being easily accessible and having a nice click, so overall it's just pretty easy to use and you won't have any issues with resetting training or pausing the game. And then at the top left, we actually have this lockout switch, so if you flick it on, it'll disable the control panel buttons, so if you're in, for example, a tournament setting, you won't accidentally pause the game. On the bottom, we have this RGB strip going all the way around, and it is pretty cool, although it is harder to see unless you're in a darker environment. And if you're pressing buttons, the RGB will flash white towards that direction. To cycle through the RGB settings, hold start, select, and press A. And not only will it change the RGB at the bottom, but it'll also change it on the button legend. And here's what the RGB looks like in the dark. At the top left of the controller, you have this USB-C port, and then towards the top you have the main USB-C port with a cutout for it. They're both just to plug in your controller. They don't function differently in any way, but it just lets you plug it in a way to better fit your setup. Then at the top right, you have a USB-A port. This is for adapters to play on the PS4 or PS5 or the Xbox Series X and S consoles. You'll just need an adapter, which allows me to play all PS4 games, but for the PS5, only fighting games. And keep in mind, there's no adapter at the moment that allows you to play both Xbox and PlayStation games with one adapter, so you will need separate adapters if you plan on playing between those two consoles. So before we begin changing out the controls, I would recommend unplugging your controller first just to be safe. Then with the provided screwdriver, unscrew the screws from the section that you plan to change out. Here I'll be changing the top left movement module for the low profile switches. And be careful not to lose the screws. Then just take it out and replace it with the new piece. And for the top left movement pieces, you can actually rotate them along these ridges to better fit the natural curvature of your hand. So after you've got everything oriented the way you like, just go ahead and tighten everything back together. Under the stick module, you'll see the text at the top, and you'll just want to align the gold pins at the top with the gold pads at the top of the slot. Once everything's plugged back in, it should just all work without any problems. So unfortunately, the analog sticks aren't plug and play, and there is going to be some extra setup in the web configurator, but it's not too difficult and you'll just need to copy a few steps and you're good to go. So to start, when you plug in your controller, you'll need to be holding the start button the whole entire time you're plugging it in. Doing this will set it to the web configurator mode, and you'll just need to go to your browser and go to this address. Upon doing so, the very first thing you want to do is click the configuration tab and go to data backup and restoration. From here, you'll want to make a backup of your current settings, that way if anything goes wrong, you can always load that file and revert to the default setting. After that, go back to the configuration tab and click on pin mapping. From there, you'll want to disable pin 26 and 27 by pressing the X all the way on the right. Once you've done so, hit save at the bottom left to save your settings. Once again, go to the configuration tab and this time hit LED configuration. At the top left, by default the pin should be 28. You'll want to change the pin to something that's not being used, so I set it to 22. You could also set it to -1, but that would disable the RGB. Whatever option you go with, always remember to hit save at the bottom left. And finally, we'll go back to the configuration tab once again and click on add-ons. Locate the analog add-on and enable it by clicking the slider at the bottom right. Then just copy these settings exactly as you see them. After that's done, press save at the bottom left once again. After you've set everything up, in the top right, click the green reboot button and press controller. Before we go over the analog sticks, I want to preface this and say that the analog sticks will not work on all consoles. On screen, you'll see which consoles they will work on, if they require an adapter, or if they don't work even if you have an adapter. If you want to know more about console compatibility, then check out the console compatibility section. Additionally, if you plan on keeping the analog sticks in the controller, it may be good to have the WASD module, as the ergonomics of the other ones make it kind of hard to press the up button, since it is spaced a bit further out, which makes it a bit more uncomfortable for fighting games. The analog sticks are actually far more comfortable than I originally thought they'd be, as the included stick caps really help with the grip. They are fairly small though, since they are Nintendo Switch style analog sticks, so you are going to end up with a bit less range of motion than with full-size analog sticks. I can see this as a great way of playing casual games, but it may be a bit more difficult to play competitive titles with. But I think it does have some viability and may just require more practice. Regardless, I really like this approach, as few companies have tried integrating analog sticks into a leverless layout, so it makes it much easier now that you don't have to swap out your controller for another one just because you're playing something other than a fighting game. On screen, you'll see which consoles require an adapter and which don't require one. For analog stick compatibility, please reference the previous section on the analog sticks. So keep in mind, for the PlayStation 5, these adapters will allow you to use the controller in PS5 fighting games, as they generally support legacy controls, so it will not work for all PS5 games. So if you want an adapter that works for all PS5 games and has analog stick support, then you'll need to get the Wingman FGC2. And this you would plug in as a normal adapter and not through the USB slot on the side of the controller as you would with other adapters. The customization this controller offers is crazy, and most companies have only really shown customizable layouts for buttons and not entire modules with different form factors and joysticks. Now for the actual feel of the controller, it's all great and responsive. The switches feel nice, and they have a really satisfying feel and sound, although they are quite loud for the full-size switches. And for those full-size switches, you get to feel out all of your inputs so you're sure you've input everything correctly, while the low-profile switches are faster, but they still offer a nice feel. Having the WASD module is also nice since it gives you the option to switch to a Mixbox layout from a Hitbox layout. That way you can try out both to see which fits you best. If you're coming from playing games on keyboard and mouse, then I definitely see this being far more intuitive than say leverless or stick, so it's definitely something to give a try. As for the joysticks, they're a really fun addition, and it's going to be nice playing some more casual games on a leverless controller. The sticks are a bit small, so you're going to have a limited range of motion, but the provided caps do help to give you a better grip on them, and you'll likely adjust over time. They also make for a pretty weird and fun input method if you do decide to use them for fighting games. If you're interested in picking one up, you can head over to the CosmoX website or the Haute42 website to find the links to their stores. They may be under a different name depending where you buy from, but that's generally because that's a different distributor of theirs. So when you buy the controller, you have the choice of the low profile switches or the full size switches, and all other additional modules will need to be purchased separately. So the price of everything can add up, so this is something else to consider. I'd recommend buying from AliExpress as they do have frequent sales and shipping generally takes under 2 weeks in my experience from China to the US. Again, this is another great addition to the Haute42 lineup. I say with each release that they're really improving the quality and experience of the controllers, and this one is definitely taking it to the next level. All the modules are really cool to experiment with, although it can get pricey. That being said, this is a great innovation, and having analog sticks alone is definitely the biggest part for me, since it just opens things up to so much more. And for those keeping up with the uploads, sorry for the huge lack of uploads. I've just been really busy lately, but I do have another video in the works, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I hope you learned something new. Let me know if you have any questions, and please consider subscribing. Thank you.